he just went low. He's in his hand. He's in his hand. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Man 100 back in another episode of How's My Team. So we've got a bit to talk about. Obviously, we've got the Titans going to Leichhardt to play the Tigers in Leichhardt's last game of the season before its redevelopment. We've got a rematch from round 2 with the Saints and the Giants playing each other. Obviously, just coming off the bye for the Giants as well. We also got to talk about the Cubs and obviously the way that they're going in their season. Obviously in series with the Rockies, with the Giants, and also with the Rockies again. And then obviously we'll talk about the World Cup because I didn't realise it was actually starting this week. So we'll talk about how Australia is doing, at least one of the games, at least this week with that. But with all that said, let's get started with the episode. Alright, Monday morning, a few things happened obviously yesterday. There was quite a few games, obviously the Giants, the Titans, obviously Australia and the World Cup as well, and obviously the Cubs as well, but obviously we'll get to that in the miscellaneous stuff. We'll go with the Giants first. I was like, I don't know which bull I want to bite when it comes down to it, but we'll start with the Giants first. And obviously, coming off the bye, went down to Melbourne to Marvel Stadium to play against St Kilda again for the second time this season. Obviously, rematch of round 2, where obviously the St Kilda Saints ended up winning by 4 points at NG. So ultimately, it was a revenge game for that. And the Giants ended up losing. They lost 8 points this time. So double the amount of score it was in round 2. 96 to 88, 14 goals 12 to 13 goals 10. And again, kicking accuracy needs to be a lot better. Obviously, yes, they've kicked a lot more goals than behinds, obviously in terms of their scoring shots. But again, 3 in front, with it being 23 shots on target, on goal. For 13 goals. It's not very accurate. Obviously, it's 26, obviously, to St Kilda, and obviously they got 14, so it's not that much better. But in saying that, I wouldn't say that they bottled it, but it was something that obviously left a lot to be desired in this game in particular. So ended up being 4 goals 3 to the Saints and 4 goals 1 to the Giants. So it was 2 points at quarter time. Then St Kilda ended up scoring 4 goals and 1 behind compared to 4 goals and 2 behinds for the Giants, which made it a 1 point margin at halftime in the Saints' favour. Then the Saints ended up scoring 2 goals and 6 behinds in the third, and 1 goal and 5 behinds for the Giants in going into the last quarter. Not ideal at that point, obviously behind by 8 points at that point in time, and then obviously the margin stayed with 4 goals and 2 behinds for the Saints and 4 goals and 2 behinds for the Giants. But in saying that, like I said, very inaccurate. In fact, I wouldn't say that the Giants bowled it because they were ahead for a decent amount of the first quarter, and then the Saints didn't really relent the lead at all after that. And I will say that they played better than the Giants, not by a lot though. In terms of the stats, obviously the disposal efficiency was about the same, 75.1% rather for the Giants, 73.2% for the Saints. Key efficiency inside 50, this is the one that really kills us 61.7% to the Saints and 45.5% to the Giants. So 25 shots from 55 inside 50s compared to 29 shots from 47. Free kicks are about the same, obviously in the Saints' favour. There's probably a few that obviously went in the favour of the Saints that probably shouldn't have. But ultimately, we had 10 more clearances as well. But in saying that, our efficiency with the ball was not that good at all. In fact, the third quarter, I was obviously at work, so I didn't see any of this particular game. But in saying that, I was watching the score, and obviously on the AFL Live app, because I also have that as well as the Giants app on my phone, and seeing the third quarter, especially late in the third quarter, I think for about 5-10 minutes, it was a behind fest. Like literally, I think it was a situation where it got to 8 points, then it was 9-10 to the Saints, and then they moved a couple back and might have got back to like 4 or 5 points for the Giants, and then it ended up being back out to 8, down to 6, up to 8 again, and it was just a mess in terms of behinds in the third quarter. And I think if they scored any particular goals in that third quarter, especially late, either team would have broke the game open a little bit. But in saying that, obviously the Saints ended up playing a lot better. In terms of the Giants goal scorers, Aaron Cadman was in the lead, 4 goals, 1. Jake Stringer, 3 goals, 1. Phoenix Goddard, 2 goals and no behinds. Toby Green, 2 goals, 1 behind. A goal to Toby Bedford. Jesse Hogan was back. He scored 1 goal, 1. And Lika Lear ended up getting a behind. Callum Brown also got a behind. Toby McMullen got a behind. And Harry Thomas also got a behind as well. But yeah, in saying that, some of those behinds probably should have been goals, to be fair, from the team. And we'll go with all the players because Liam Ryan ended up scoring 6 goals, 2 for the game for the Saints. So that's one thing that they killed us. And I think, was Finn Callahan playing at all? Yeah, he was. 28 disposals, so a decent game for him. But obviously pressure was on pretty much for the full game. In particular, 31 to Lockie Whitfield as well in terms of disposals. 35 Clayton Oliver, again working from the middle, fantastic. But Nasiah, obviously Wanganeen Miller, 32 disposals there as well. It's just one of those things where this team, I swear, in some form or fashion, just don't know how to win sometimes, and they get under pressure really, really, really well. And they just can't get out of it. And so with that loss, and especially considering it was a close loss, I was looking at the table yesterday, and the Giants ended up, obviously with the bye, they ended up staying in the top 10, but have just been kicked out by, I'm not even kidding, 0.1% in terms of percentage, and St Kilda is the one that has actually jumped into the top 10. We've dropped down to 11th with obviously 6 wins and 7 losses for the year. But obviously we've played our extra bye as well. So we're done for the rest of the year in terms of byes. But yeah, kicked out by 1.1%. And ultimately feel like I kind of deserve it because the fact is the Giants did not play well at all in the majority of this game in particular. They kept with them, but they just couldn't break in front, and ultimately playing from behind, and especially with, obviously, as I said, 23 scoring shots, and 13 of those were goals, yes, but I'm sure there was plenty more shots in front of goal that were even set shots of the 10 behinds that they ended up getting, and even some of the ones that went out on the full, because I'm sure there was a few of those as well that could have possibly been more points or more goals, especially the shots that missed and went for behinds. I know there was a few rush behinds in the game, obviously, but yeah, it's not a great situation when you're playing from behind pretty much the majority of the game and trying to make it up. And ultimately, obviously, Jesse Hogan was back for this game in particular, and he didn't play fantastically. I don't know if Max Grueski being put into the side would have been as much of a difference, but ultimately it probably would have helped in some regard, because obviously, yeah, it was not a great showing in terms of the team, in terms of the lineup. Who actually was in? So Coggers obviously was injured, and Max was omitted, and then obviously Ryan Angwin got back into the side as well. Obviously, the two players that they thought were going to be in the side at the start of the week, in returning late last week, did actually return. Obviously, hopefully Coggers is okay in terms of his injury. Hopefully, it's not a big one at that, but obviously Ryan Angwin back from obviously a concussion and being injured, and obviously Jesse Hogan back with that injury, which I think was a calf injury, I believe. So, yeah, it's not ideal, obviously, in 11th position. In terms of the table, not much has changed, though in saying that, the Swans did pick up a win as well. They've got 12 wins and 2 losses, but are actually behind on percentage, so they're actually in second position. Fremantle's still on top, despite having the bye this week. This weekend just gone, 4.2% between Fremantle and the Swans. So the Swans, who have beaten the team, they've scored well over 100 points, actually won by over 100 points with 2 games this year, are not on top of the table, which is absolutely insane to say. But it just shows the dominance that the Fremantle Dockers have had most of this season in terms of results for them. Geelong in third position with 36 points. Fourth position is Melbourne. Ended up getting a decent win in their own right. Hawthorn dropped to fifth position with 34 points. Adelaide obviously jump up into sixth position on 32 points. Obviously, great win for them. Then the Brisbane Lions jumped to seventh, also on 32 points. The Bulldogs dropped to eighth with 32. Which is their percentage getting a big hit, obviously, with the loss that they had this week. The Suns also dropped as well. They got blown out by Geelong at the end of the game, though they kept up with them for most of the first half and a lot of the third quarter, but they just got absolutely dominated after that at the Cattery. So they dropped to ninth position on 28 points. Obviously, as I said, St Kilda on 24. In 10th position, Giants dropped to 11th, also on 24, and then North Melbourne ended up picking up a win against West Coast. So they move up to 24 points and move up to 12th position. So obviously the bye for Collingwood has not been great because they started in 11th position and have dropped to 13th at the end of the week with 22 points. Carlton dropped to 14th, also on the bye, and are on 20 points. Port Adelaide in 15th position with 16 points, though realistically they should be on 20 points. They had most of the game won basically against the Swans, and they just bowled it at the end. And that's, that is something that they really should be looking at because they should have had that game won. West Coast, unfortunately, missed out. Obviously, with North Melbourne, it was a 1-point loss for the West Coast Eagles. Obviously, Jake Waterman ended up having the kick that could have won them the game, but obviously hit the post. So it ended up being very, very narrow loss for them. They sit in 16th position. So ultimately, those two teams could have jumped into 20, and it would have actually made things a little bit interesting because obviously West Coast probably would have stayed in the same position. Carlton would have dropped back into the bottom 4, and Port Adelaide would have jumped out of the bottom 4 with a win. So yeah, it's very interesting to see what happens with that. Richmond put up a good fight against Brisbane. And in fact, actually, despite this being in Tasmania, we're in front by a decent margin in a majority of this game. For a lot of it, they were in front of the Premiers. They did lose by like 30-odd points. At the end of it all, I think it was 35 points at the end of it. But a great showing from Richmond, actually one of their highest totals in terms of their team total all year long. So I think it rated third, I think, overall for the season. So not a bad showing from Richmond, especially obviously against the Lions. The Lions obviously, yes, missing a couple of players, but in saying that, they haven't been as yes, haven't been as dominant, but again, two-time defending champions back-to-back. It's always going to be tough to play them, especially when you're near the bottom of the ladder. And obviously the Tigers had a good showing, so good props to them for doing well in that game. And then Essendon obviously are on the bottom, still languishing with that one win of the season, which makes this game coming up at NG against Carlton Blues very important for the Giants, because if they don't pick up a win on Saturday, you can almost cross us out for finals and even a wildcard spot at this point in time, because after that it's the Hawks at the MCG, then the Dockers in Canberra, then we're back home at NG against the Cats, then Marvel Stadium against Essendon, then obviously Battle of the Bridge against the Swans at NG, then we go to Adelaide Oval to play Port, then after that we play the Suns at Canberra, then at NG against the Eagles. Obviously the day for that in particular has not been set, and obviously the Crows at Adelaide Oval for the last round of the season, and that date has also not been set just yet. But a lot of these games are Sunday and Saturday. The only one obviously is Friday, which is obviously against the Hawks. It's our last big matinee game. Obviously, one of those last two games could possibly be a Thursday or a Friday game, to be fair. But there's not many games that ultimately you think that would win, because ultimately you think Carlton, with their form, you don't know. It's going to be a 50-50. The Hawks have been playing relatively well. It just depends on their recent results, and they ultimately could be playing a lot better. And obviously that would be a rematch for opening round. But at the MCG, the Dockers are flying, so you can't say that's going to be a win, despite it being in Canberra. The Cats, we've beaten them 4 times in a row at the Cattery, but in saying that, Geelong are flying pretty high, and playing in Sydney is not going to be any joke. Essendon, you'd think that they'd win, the Giants would win that game. Obviously at Marvel Stadium, it hasn't been our greatest ground. I don't know if we've won this year at Marvel. But obviously against an Essendon side that's pretty desperate. Sydney are flying, so playing them at NG, and obviously it being a Sydney derby, it's going to be a huge situation. Again, it could be like last year where it could be a boil over as well. Port Adelaide, they've been in and amongst the results in terms of a couple of wins that they probably should have gotten, so they should be higher on the ladder. Then obviously Expansion Cup with the Suns, obviously getting decently beaten in the first game. West Coast, you'd say that's a 50-50 game in the way that the West Coast Eagles are playing, and Adelaide are in the top 10, so none of these games are going to be very, very easy to win at all. I think there might be like 2 games that we might possibly be like, oh yeah, we should be able to win those, but again, one of those is obviously at the Adelaide Oval against Port Adelaide, you would think. So that's not going to be an easy game in general. So if we lose against the Carlton Blues, you can almost say that we're out and not going to make finals, and possibly it could be a situation where Adam Kingsley might lose his job if we do end up missing out on finals this season, because he's been at the helm for a little while and we just haven't had the results go our way. Obviously, yes, injuries this year has not been great, but in saying that, the last few seasons we've obviously gotten to going out in the finals the first week, we've missed. Then we've also gotten to the semi-finals and also missed, but we haven't made it to prelim in like 5-6 seasons since we were with Leon Cameron as coach. So, results do show that when it comes to coaches and jobs, it's not going to be an easy thing, and ultimately that means that if the results are not coming, it's only one result that's going to be the case, and it's going to be a coach losing their job. So I don't want Adam Kingsley to lose his job, but it makes this game against Carlton at home very important for the rest of the season, because ultimately you would have thought with the win against Brisbane, obviously it would have been a crazy win, obviously in that, obviously playing against Melbourne. I don't know whether the bye come at the wrong time, I don't know, but in terms of travel, probably was a good time to have it. Obviously coming from the Northern Territory to then go down to Melbourne, that probably would have been not ideal for the Giants. But in saying that, it's not the first time that we've had to travel a decent chunk of distance, but it's just one of those things, But 8-point loss to the Saints for the Giants, and again, wouldn't say bottle it, but yeah, there could have been a lot to be desired, and kicking accuracy needs to be a lot better again for another game this season. And speaking on that, we go to the other game, obviously against the Titans against the Tigers, and you know how I said that a team could have bottled it? Yeah, it was the Titans. The Titans ended up losing 36-28. It ended up being the final score. And I will say, when it comes to this, I didn't know this, but this was the last game at Leichhardt for the next couple of years, because obviously they're doing some redevelopment for the ground, obviously getting a new lot of grandstands and stuff like that at the stadium. So obviously the Tigers obviously coming off a 68-0 loss to the Panthers obviously last week, obviously flying high last week with the Titans in winning over the Brisbane Broncos, and not an ideal result at all for the Titans. In fact, they're actually up at halftime. They were up 18-12 at halftime. Though in saying that, the Tigers did score the first 2 tries off Stafford Toa halfway through the 12th minute. Was converted. Then Taylor May on a very, very bad drop from Keanu Kinney, and obviously we'll talk about more about Keanu Kinney in this segment. But yeah, drop into Taylor May, start of the 26th minute, he ended up scoring, and then Jock Madden ended up converting it. Jaden Campbell basically took the team on his back. Obviously, Keanu Kinney kind of made up for it with not 1 but 2 but 3 breaks to make tries and try opportunities. Obviously, Jaden Campbell was the one that come down with it late in the 30th minute. Curtis Moran obviously got involved as well. Great effort from him at the end of the 34th minute. And then Arama Howe got a break as well, scored late in the 36th minute. So we ended up scoring 3 tries in the space of about 7-8 minutes. And yeah, 18 points to 12 at halftime. Biofirma ended up going over about halfway through in the 42nd minute. And it was converted to 24-12. So we led by 12 points very early in the second half. Then Jerome Luai said, look, Jaden Campbell, I see that you're taking your team on the back. I'm taking my team on my back now. And ended up scoring very late in the 47th minute. Was converted. Then Alex Seyfarth scored at the start of the 53rd minute. Was converted. Then Philip Sami put the brakes on the momentum. Obviously, that was a tying try from Seyfarth, and the conversion, obviously. The conversion was missed by Jaden Campbell, so we only went up by 4. Made it 28-24. And Jerome Luai scored another try very early, about halfway through the 70th minute. It's converted, and then right in the last minute, Jerome Luai scored again to make it 36-28. And yeah, so ultimately, as I said, 12 points in front very early, yes, in the second half. But in saying that, you score 28 points and you lose still. Like, how the fuck does that happen? And again, what I will say is that it was obviously our discipline and our errors that let us down, because possession was very even, 52% in the Tigers' favour, 48% obviously in the Titans. The completion rate, 90% to the Tigers, 77% to the Titans. So 27%, sorry, I should say 13% being a difference there. So that matters in that, because that's a couple of sets of that. Kick defusal, 42% in the Titans' favour, 38% in the Tigers' favour. Effective tackles, 1% between the two of the teams. But here's the errors: 14-8 in terms of the Titans. 4 penalties conceded to 1 in the favour of the Titans. 2 ruck infringements each, 1 on report. for the Titans, 2 for the Tigers. But yeah, it's pretty average. I will say Keanu Kinney dropped quite a few crucial balls, got out jumped as well, which led to a try. I think he dropped 2 that caused tries as well. But there was a lot of errors from this team, and that's something that's really let us down. And ultimately, again, like I said, we kind of bottled it again for the second time this season. Like the game against the Dolphins earlier this year, we bottled it again. And obviously, other results did not go our favour either, because the Eels did end up winning as well. So we dropped to 16th position on the ladder after being up. And we'll go over the table now. Obviously, Penrith still on top, 12 wins, 1 loss. Obviously had the bye. The next game is obviously not great for the Titans, because I just seen who we're playing, because I completely forgot. The Warriors in second position, they ended up losing. They lost by 2 points, obviously, to Cronulla, in very contentious fashion, I will say. So they're 6 points behind Penrith on 22. Manly still in third position with 20. And then the Dolphins jump into the top 4. Yes, the top 4 also on 20 points. So fantastic result for them. Obviously, they got a big win earlier this week. Cronulla, as I said, move into 5th position with the win over the Warriors, jump to 20 of themselves. Then the Sydney Roosters drop to 6th position with a heavy loss for them. I expected they were going to lose. Obviously, I did pick them to lose against the Dolphins. I didn't expect the Dolphins to win by almost like 30 points at that point in time. And I think I'll actually go over the results in a second. Newcastle also on 20 points as well, so a huge block from 3rd to 7th down. So 5 teams all on 20 points there. It's just obviously for and against. It's obviously going to let some teams down there. And then rounding out the top 8 is South Sydney with 18 points in their own right. 9th position is the Cowboys on 18. And then the Tigers also on 18 points in 10th position, obviously with the win over the Titans. 11th position is Melbourne with 14. Bulldogs jump into 12th position, also on 14 points. Canberra jump into 13th position with 12. Despite obviously them losing as well. They lost to the Eels, and we'll get to that in a second. Which means that Brisbane drop into the bottom 4, also on 12 points, just there for and against, obviously letting them down. They drop in 7 points, the difference between Canberra and the Broncos, 101 in the minus for Canberra, 108 for Brisbane. Parramatta jump into 15th position with 12 points as well, 100 minus 149 on their for and against. Titans, obviously, as I said, in 16th position with 10, minus 91, so not as bad as I thought. In fact, actually, that's better than the Dragons, who was obviously still on the bottom with 6 points, obviously had the bye this week as well. So better than the Dragons, better than the Eels, better in for and against than the Broncos, Canberra, and the Dogs. So we're beating, in terms of for and against, we're beating like 5 teams in and around the mix. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 teams in terms of the bottom of the ladder. So it's not, it's wins that are going to obviously come, and obviously they have not. But obviously, in terms of results, it was 48-6 for the Rabbitohs over the Broncos, 48-10 for the against the Roosters for the Dolphins. So 38 points in the second game and 42 points in the first game. So both of those teams could have almost had 50s conceded against them. It was 10-8 for the Sharks, 15-12 for the Eels, so that the Eels were leading 9-0 at halftime, so we'll say that. And then obviously 8-point loss for the Titans in round 15. Round 16, Saturday, 5:30. Yeah, Titans versus the Panthers at Seabus. Obviously a revenge game from last year's controversial loss. The first time that we've played the Panthers, and the Panthers are flying high. I'm surprised that we're at $4.20 in terms of the odds. They got the odds for the betting companies, $1.23 for the Panthers and $4.20 for the Titans. I am surprised that is the case, but again, in saying that, I guess we don't have the team list right now. That's not until tomorrow. But we won't have most of the team list, obviously, until after Origin 2, which we'll talk about in a second. But going to be a very, very tough game at Seabus, but should have got a win against the Tigers. That would have helped us a lot better, because I have a feeling we're going to get absolutely trounced by the Panthers. I have like a 5% belief that we could do well against them, but again, some of the other teams, obviously, in saying that, the Dragons obviously played relatively well against the Panthers a couple of weeks ago, but I'm just, we got to fix up those errors, and Keanu Kinney is just going to get out-jumped by, Brian Toll at the back. Obviously, it's going to be one of those things where Jenkins is also probably going to jump him as well. It's just going to be a mess. But obviously 8-point loss for the Titans, and then we move ahead to wearing this because it's going to matter on Wednesday when we play the Maroons on Wednesday. Obviously the Maroons got to win this game. Haven't won at the MCG since 1995, but obviously records can be broken. I'm hoping it doesn't, because if it goes to a decider, we're playing Queensland. And yes, we did win the last one. In saying that, it's not going to be great because obviously the Queensland Maroons are going to be up for the fight. So I hope that they do win. The Blues do win at the MCG on Wednesday night coming. In fact, it'll be the night of when this video goes up in terms of my time. But yeah, 8-point loss to the Titans against the Tigers, and I guess it is a fitting farewell at Leichhardt Oval for the Tigers to win in a very, very tough game that was pretty much down to the wire. Alright, for the miscellaneous stuff, obviously we're going to talk about the Colorado Rockies series of games, obviously at Coors Field, which obviously is in Colorado. So obviously they played them first. Obviously the first game against the Giants is already played, and the second one will be playing today at the time we're recording this. But obviously the previous series has already started, so we'll talk about obviously all the stuff about the Giants in a couple of days, and then obviously going forward to the series at home against the Rockies for the Cubs. But ultimately went to Coors Field, and then it ended up being a 2-1 series loss again to the Rockies. And I'm just going to say this, it was against the worst team in baseball right now, because the Rockies are at the bottom of the National League, and in terms of their record, is the worst record in baseball right now, including even before going into this series and even after this. Yeah, but it was 2-1, thankfully. It wasn't a sweep. It was looking like it was going to be a sweep, which means that, yes, they won the first 2 games, including a heartbreaker in terms of the second game. Obviously, it was 7-3 in the first game. They scored all 7 runs in the first 3 innings, which definitely didn't help things at all in terms of pitching, and that's something that was really, really apparent when it comes to pitching. Obviously, Raya only struck out 2, was in for 4 2/3 innings, and all 7 runs come off him. Then Rollerson went in, got 1K, Roberts didn't get any, and Milner came in for the last inning that we pitched and got 1K as well. So literally 2 players ended up getting just as many Ks as Colin Raya did in the game. In terms of the way that scoring went, it was a 2-run home run in the bottom of the first. It was a home run in the second, and then it was a scoring on a double, and then scoring on a single to make it 5-0. Alex Bregman got out on a sacrifice fly, and Dansby ended up scoring to make it 5-1. Then it was a single which scored 2, which made it 7-1. Michael Bush ended up hitting a homer, which made it 7-2. Then Seiya Suzuki grounded out, which scored Alex Bregman in the top of the 6th to make it 3 runs for the Cubs. It made it 7-3, and then obviously, But what I will say is that when it comes to the Cubs, they ended up hitting 8 hits, and got many on base as well. In fact, does it actually have... runners in scoring position, 0 from 8, and left 8 people on base for the entire game. So that's something that, again, there's been another issue with this team. Then it was 3 runs to 2 in the second game, so the Cubs ended up leading. It was 1 run in the bottom of the 4th, and what I will say is that who was pitching for this one? Trying to think. I think it was Shota. Yeah, Shota ended up pitching for this for 5 innings, and got 7 strikeouts. So he actually did get. He didn't actually really get. He got 2 hits in, but ultimately did well. I think that ultimately he's kind of pulled it back a little bit. It was great from him, because he's been under pressure a lot in a lot of games that we've played in the last month or so, but this has been one of his standout performances. And then we put Matten in for 2/3 of an inning. Then we swapped him for Caleb Thielbar, and literally I think in his 3rd pitch, he ended up walking somebody, or someone got a hit, and then ultimately they scored. So top of the 4th was PCA ended up hitting a triple. No, sorry, that's key moments. In terms of score, Big Mo ended up scoring PCA in to make it 1-0. The bottom of the 8th, this was when Caleb was pitching at this point. 2-run home run, a little bit away from the middle of the plate, but fucking hell. We held run for so long, and then obviously gave up 2. Ian Happ in the top of the 9th ended up hitting a homer. And then the bottom of the 9th happened with Palencia in. And he gave away a walk of the first batsman, which in baseball, that's something you can never do. The first batter, you cannot give a walk to them at the start of the bottom of the 9th inning, especially when it's a tie game, because ultimately they ended up having a single, which made it obviously one person on 3rd base and one person on 1st base, and then they had to hit a single when it got a break and make it 3-2 in the bottom of the 9th. So they walked it off in the second game. And then when the pressure was off, after the series loss, the Cubs ended up winning 9-3 in the last game. It definitely was a lot better from Cabrera, though in saying that, Colorado did hit a homer first in the bottom of the 3rd inning, so they ended up leading the game. But we got a couple of hits in the top of the 4th, and then Seiya Suzuki come in with a grand salami with PCA, Michael Bush, Ian Happ, and obviously himself scoring to make it 4-1 in the top of the 4th. They got a homer. The Rockies got a homer in the bottom of the 4th, which made it 4-2. Then Michael Bush ended up hitting a single, where Dansby scored for 5. Ian Happ got out on a sacrifice fly. Alex Bregman scored, make it 6 in the top of the 5th. And then the top of the 7th, Alex Bregman got a 2-run home run. Very low, in fact, as well in the strike zone. I'm surprised he hit it all the way down there. Chased it all the way down. It was in the bottom of the strike zone, so if it did miss the bat, it was going to be a strike, no doubt in my mind. But got a little bit of leverage. Scored 2 to make it 8-2, and then the top of the 8th, Carson Kelly joined the show, ended up hitting a homer to make it 9-2, and then they homered on a fly ball to right field in the bottom of the ninth to make it 9-3. And I think Ferguson, was actually pitching that last inning as well, and there was a couple of players on base as well, which made it a little bit interesting. It was definitely something that made me a little bit nervous, especially with like at least two people on base with at least 2 outs or at least 1 out. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. But Ferguson obviously coming in, Trent Thornton actually was out for paternity leave, so he ended up he had a baby with his partner. Not sure if it was a boy or a girl, but obviously congrats to him. He just come back into the side and was actually playing yesterday in the first game against the Giants in San Francisco. So ultimately, a couple of days break. But Ferguson, obviously his ERA was completely out. But he did well. He got 3 strikeouts when needed it. So it was great. Left 4 people on base, which actually wasn't as bad for the Cubs, but obviously, still got a decent amount there. Whereas the Rockies ended up leaving 10 on base for the team. So 9-3 win for that. So obviously won the last game of the series, but 2-1 series loss to the worst team in baseball. And I was pretty pissed about it at the time. Obviously, the last game is like the pressure comes off, and like we win the last game, it just doesn't make any sense. But that's the Cubs at this point in time. Obviously, the record was 35-34 going into obviously the series with the Giants. So but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that on Monday when we'll get there. Tomorrow with everything else, because everything else is playing at the same time. I think at the time of recording, obviously the Giants game hasn't started, the Titans game hasn't started, and obviously the game for Australia, which is I believe against Turkey in the first game, that also hasn't started, and I think that starts in a couple of hours. So we'll talk about all of that tomorrow, including obviously the series with the San Francisco Giants as well, because obviously the first game played yesterday, second game plays in a couple of hours, about a little bit less than 2 hours from recording this, and then obviously the third game is actually playing at 5:10 in the morning my time. So by the time I wake up and get all sorted, obviously it's a day off for me tomorrow, that game should be almost done by the time I wake up, or at least halfway through. So when I'm recording everything, by the time that happens, I think it'll most likely be done at that point. So we'll see what happens. But 2-1 series loss to the worst team in baseball in the Rockies. Great for the Cubs. Absolutely great. And now we go to more miscellaneous stuff. Obviously, we did talk about the Cubs. Obviously, in the series against the Rockies, I did mention that earlier in this segment. Obviously, going to put this segment after that. We'll talk about the Cubs in a second, because we've obviously got the series in San Francisco to talk about. We're going to talk about the World Cup first, because obviously that has started now. We've had some great results, obviously, in there already. And Australia, and talking about the game with Australia, obviously in the group with US, Turkey, and Paraguay. And it was a 2-0 win against Turkey in their first game yesterday. Fantastic result for them. Kind of a bit unexpected, actually. I thought maybe a draw at best would have been the result here, but against Turkey, who I believe in terms of the rankings in the FIFA rankings, I think are like 4 positions in front of us. I think they're 23 and we're 27, I think it was. I think I read. But ultimately, great situation for the Australians, obviously in their tough group. Obviously, it's not the toughest group, but it is a tough group. Nestri and Iraconda, obviously, is a guy that has played, I believe, for Norwich City in the Championship. He's obviously played in the A-League as well. He scored in the 27th minute off a fantastic ball. Great play from him. And then Connor Metcalf ended up scoring the second goal, which obviously put the goal difference in our favour quite heavily. in our group, scored in the 75th minute off pretty much a break in the midfield. Obviously, played the ball around his feet himself and bang, straight in the goal. Ultimately, in terms of stats, we got dominated pretty much the entire game. It was 30 shots to 9 in Turkey's favour, 7 shots on target to 4. But obviously, Turkey didn't score at all. We scored 2. So we ended up scoring at 50% in terms of our shots on target. So that's fantastic in that regard. 63% possession to 27 in terms of Turkey's favour as well. Passing accuracy, I should say, 92% to 76%, well in Turkey's favour. 1 yellow card, obviously, in terms of Turkey. 3 offsides compared to 1 for the Turkey side. And yeah, that's a fantastic result in terms of the Australians. Fantastic. Puts us second in our group, obviously, on the same amount of points as the USA. But obviously, in terms of goal difference, we're behind by the US because obviously the US ended up winning 4-1 in their game against Paraguay. The next game, obviously, is on the 20th in terms of Australia and the US. So it's going to be a top-of-the-table clash in terms of the group for the Australians. Hopefully it'll be a great result. It's 5 a.m. my time, so not ideal in terms of time period there. But that game, obviously the one against Turkey was in Vancouver. This one will be in Seattle. So ultimately, nice little home for us there because obviously I'm a Seattle fan, Seattle Seahawks fan. So I love it says Seattle Stadium. Obviously, it's at be obviously at the home ground, obviously, or it could be the stadium, obviously, where the Seattle FC play in the MLS. So in terms of other results, with the games in particular, Japan ended up scoring an equaliser to make it 2-2 with the Netherlands. Germany put 7 behind past Curacao. That Curacao was 7-1, so they did end up getting their first goal in terms of the campaign, in terms of their first World Cup. So fantastic for them. Obviously not great, but obviously Germany's won the competition a couple of times previously. So the fact that obviously, they had scored 7, against a team that hasn't obviously played in the finals before. It's just something that happens sometimes. Obviously, we've seen Brazil go down previously against Germany 7-1 as well, so it's not out of their feet. Scotland 1-0 over Haiti. Brazil, speaking on them, against Morocco, they ended up a 1-1 draw. Qatar scored very late in their game against the Swiss. It was a 1-1 draw in that. As I said, USA 4-1 in their game. Canada ended up scoring a goal very late as well. It was a 1-1 draw for them. South Korea ended up winning over the Czech Republic, and Mexico ended up winning the first game 2-0 over South Africa. And I did see a video over the weekend of Mexicans being around South Koreans and playing Gangnam Style, and all of them just vibing, just dancing. And that's the idea of the World Cup that I want to see, obviously with certain political views and political figures in terms of one particular nation that is hosting at the moment. It's good to see the vibes of like multiple different cultures coming together to celebrate obviously the World Cup, obviously celebrating different cultures coming in to the countries that obviously are hosting, and it's great to see. Obviously, yes, some people will say that it's a bit racist in the fact that they're playing Gangnam Style, I guess, but in saying that, obviously that song was not only a worldwide phenomenon eventually, but was a phenomenon in Korea. It's still played heavily over there as well. Obviously, K-pop is huge over there. Obviously, with Psy, and that song in particular was fantastic for him. Obviously, got heap of views around the world, and it's something that obviously the Mexican people have recognized as a fantastic song for the South Koreans. So they played it there, and they obviously were dancing and having a great time, and that's realistically that's what it's all about in terms of the World Cup, bringing cultures together, bringing countries together, and obviously around football / soccer, but obviously it's cultures going to a particular place. Obviously in this case it's a whole continent, obviously with the fact that it's in Mexico, in the US, and obviously in Canada with games as well. For this World Cup, it's bringing a whole lot of cultures from all over the world and different continents to that one continent of North America. So it's great to see. In terms of that, obviously we've had obviously all sorts of situations, but that's one of the notable ones that I'd seen over the weekend. I just wanted to bring mention to it because it brought a smile on my face a little bit, and obviously with the fact that there's been so many hardships and so many awkward situations in terms of that, with a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world politically and obviously socially as well. Just to see a moment like that where there's a little bit of unity between two cultures that not necessarily are opposites, but obviously kind of on one side of the world compared to the other side of the world. It's great to just see them combine together, just have a great time together in their presence of each other, and just have a great time in terms of that. But obviously 2-0 obviously to Australia over Turkey, and obviously big game against the USA. The USA will say that it is going to be it's going to be a walk in terms of them winning. I don't know if it will be. In terms of the possession, it probably should be, but ultimately it's one of those things. But what can I say when it comes to that? Hopefully, we show up against the US and give them a run for their money. And I would hope, most likely, we're probably going to lose that game. If we come out with a draw, that's great. If we come out with a win, that's going to be absolutely excellent. And the fact that we'll probably go straight through to obviously the last 32 in terms of the World Cup, that'd be fantastic. But any points that we can get against the US is going to be helping us to get to that final 32 group situation, because that's always going to be a tough thing altogether, is to qualify straight through. Because it's always hard to qualify for the World Cup. Obviously, the World Cup finals in general. Obviously, yes, it's technically a group stage, but obviously you're talking about quite a few countries going into this. I think it was 96 going into the World Cup this year, and obviously the qualifying games for like the past 2 years before that to lead into that are not easy. And then obviously getting through the group stage in terms of what groups you get, it's always going to be tough as well. We'll talk about the Cubs now. There's another sneeze. And there's the second one. That's usually what happens. So it's 3 sneezes for all the video. But obviously had a series in San Francisco for the Cubs. Obviously played the Giants not too long ago. Obviously it was 2-1 series loss at Wrigley Field against them. And ended up being a 2-1 series win. So yes, first series win that the Cubs have had in well over a month. And yes, in saying that, yes, it was a 2-1 series win, so we did lose a game in there. But in the first game, it was 5 runs to 1, scored 2 in the top of the 4th and 3 in the top of the 5th. And they did score a run in the bottom of the 8th. In the bottom of the 9th, rather. In terms of scoring, Seiya Suzuki scored a double. Ian Happ ended up scoring in that. And then a sacrifice fly from Nico on the second out. Scored Seiya in. Fantastic in terms of that. It's funny, he said it's a double, but he ended up getting to third, which is weird. But yeah, so ended up being 2-0, 2-zip. Then Michael Bush scored a 3-run home run with Carson Kelly and Alex Bregman also scoring in that homer to make it 5-0, and then obviously it was a homer to a fly ball and right field to make it the final score of 5-1 in the first game. Then the second game was 6-1 was the win, and I did leave one notable thing in that Pedro Ramirez scored his first big league home run in the top of the fifth, so fantastic for him. Hopefully it's the first of many. But we started off great in the first inning because it was off the first pitch. No, I'm not even kidding. The first pitch. PCA ended up hitting a homer to make it 1-0 in the top of the first. CS scored a single in the top of the third to score PCA in again. Ultimately, we scored to make it 2-0. Then there was a pitch. I didn't even realise this to make it 3-0, but Ian Happ ended up stealing second base off pitch, and in doing so, at the same time, Michael Bush was on third and actually ended up stealing home. So the ball actually went after the pitch to second base to try and get Ian Happ out, but in doing so, the ball obviously left home base, and Michael Bush ended up trying to steal at the same time. So he ended up scoring a run off that too. In the top of the third, so it made it 3-0. Then San Francisco ended up hitting a triple on a fly ball, and obviously they scored one. The top of the fourth, Michael Bush walked, but we had loaded bases at the time, so actually Dansby Swanson ended up scoring, made it 4-1 at the top of the fourth. Ian Happ scored a homer in the top of the fifth. And also, as I said, Pedro Ramirez with his first home run in the top of the fifth as well to make it the ending score of 6-1, which made it, made it 3 wins in a row, and obviously a series win. And obviously this morning we lost 5-1. Not great. In terms of that, it was a double on a fly ball in the bottom of the fifth that Ian Happ did not cover up. Was not great in terms of fielding in that regard. Made it 1-0. Then a homer, which scored 2 in the bottom of the fifth as well from Colin Rea. So not great from him. It was a single in the bottom of the seventh, which scored the fourth run. And then Alex Bregman ended up scoring a single on a pop-up to first baseman, when Dansby ended up scoring. Alex Bregman actually went to second base, obviously off a throwing error as well, but obviously we got out in that regard. And then a single on fly ball in the bottom of the eighth scored another run for San Francisco in the bottom of the eighth to make it 5-1 in terms of that. I will say in terms of the score, Colin Rea was in there for 4 2/3 innings. Got 2 strikeouts, but obviously 6 hits, 4 runs, not ideal in that. And obviously Roberts ended up giving up a run as well in his 2/3 innings towards the end. But yeah, not ideal. Left 5 on base as well, which wasn't ideal for this game. But again, in saying that was a 2-1 series win for the Cubs, so not a bad result in terms of that. Obviously, would have been great to get the sweep, but obviously didn't get the sweep. And we did move a couple of games back. Obviously, in terms of every other team every other team in our division apart from the Brewers today ended up losing. So we're only 7.5 games outside of the lead of the division. Obviously, St. Louis are in front of us by 2.5 games. And they're 5 games behind Milwaukee. 8.5. So 1 game behind us is Pittsburgh, though I'm surprised about that, considering that they are 1 game in front of us, and 10.5 games to the Cincinnati Reds to before the lead. But in saying that, Chicago, in terms of the wild card spots, are in 8th at this point in time, 1 game outside as well. Atlanta's still on top, but they did end up losing the series to the Mets. In saying that, second, 1 game behind them in terms of wins. Obviously, they've lost 2 more games, but the Dodgers are behind them, and then Milwaukee are a couple of wins behind them as well. In third, obviously St. Louis in fourth, a game and a half in front of dropping out of the wildcard spot. Philadelphia Phillies ended up jumping into the 5th position, and San Diego Padres, Padres rather, in that 6th position. Obviously, the Washington Nationals also jump into 7th, so they've actually won a few games and actually on the same record as the Cubs right now, so that's crazy. And I think obviously they've pushed ahead in terms of obviously winning 6 of the last 10, and then obviously the win in terms of the series, and in terms of runs as well. They've got +4 in terms of runs scored compared to us. Obviously we've got +9, they've got +13, but obviously they've got the record above us as well in the fact that they won 2-1 in the first series of the season. Arizona are behind us by half a game, then it's Miami, then Pittsburgh is still out by 2 games, so they're behind us by 1 game in terms of the wild card. Cincinnati Reds are behind by 4, so they're 2 games behind us, and obviously Colorado, San Francisco 9 games out, and Colorado drop back to 11. In terms of the American League, the Yankees jump back into the top position after a few weeks out. Obviously, Tampa Bay have lost a couple of games in that particular series. Not ideal for them. Obviously, 2nd position, the White Sox actually not too far behind. They are 6 wins behind. They have lost 5 games compared to the Yankees, obviously. And Seattle in 3rd position in terms of that American League, and then obviously Tampa Bay in 4th, obviously taking the Yankees spot, 7.5 games inside the wild card from dropping out. The Cleveland Guardians 3.5 games in, and then the Athletics in the 6th position, though in saying that the Texas Rangers are playing right now and are up 6 runs to 2 in the top of the 6th at the time of recording. So they're half a game out. They could actually jump into that 6th position with a win if they do get a win themselves. So they'll jump in and push the Athletics out, despite the Athletics actually losing today. That's probably the thing that's going to hurt them the most, apart from obviously it being, I think it was 23 runs to 9 in terms of the Rockies winning in that game in particular. So that's crazy. Then Toronto, a game and a half out. Baltimore Orioles, 2 games out. The Twins, 3 games out. And obviously, the Angels are on the bottom still, but they're obviously shifting the positions in terms of the bottom 3 with Detroit and Kansas City Royals also being in and around the mix. Obviously, 6 and 6.5 games out in terms of them. So they're swapping positions down the bottom a bit, but obviously big series coming up. In fact, actually the 2 series coming up as well, because obviously tomorrow, in terms of when this video goes up, we'll be in the middle of the series against the Colorado Rockies at home at Wrigley Field. We'll have the day off on the Friday, and then it'll be at home against the Blue Jays before obviously the Mets, playing the Mets at Citi Field in New York, and then obviously playing Milwaukee and San Diego at home at Wrigley Field. So it'll be Rockies at home at Wrigley Field, the day off on the 19th, then a few series back-to-back. It'll be Toronto at Wrigley Field, then at Citi Field, obviously in New York, against the Mets. 3 games in Milwaukee against Milwaukee at American Family Field, then at home at Wrigley Field against the San Diego Padres before the break, our next break on the 3rd of July. And then the All-Star game is not until the 14th. So ultimately, we have 2 breaks in the space of a week in terms of July, because we have one on the 3rd and then have another one on the 7th. With obviously a series between us and St. Louis being in between those 2 breaks. But these next few games obviously going to be really crucial. Obviously, Toronto are in around the mix in the wildcard spot. Mets jumping up. They've won a few games. Colorado Rockies obviously just beat us in Colorado. Milwaukee obviously being on top of the division. San Diego obviously being in that wildcard spot as well. And then obviously after the break, St. Louis obviously in the division as well. It's not going to be a situation where it's going to be great for us if we lose a couple of the series. So these series against especially the Rockies, especially after a series win over the Giants, hopefully we can get a series win and possibly a sweep against the Rockies. But again, in saying that, we did lose the last series 2-1. So who knows with this team. And then obviously after the break, obviously going into Wrigley Field against Toronto. Now, I will say, in saying that, in the second game, Seiya Suzuki ended up, tweaked his knee, his right knee, in the second game at Oracle Park in San Francisco. It's weird because he did get injured. He came up with a great catch in, I believe it was in the third inning to keep the score in our favour. But he came up short in an effort. I'm just reading this article now. Came up short in an effort to catch a sinking liner off the bat of Matt Chapman in the fourth inning. After reaching forward and coming up short, he stepped awkwardly and tried to hold his momentum before retreating after the ball. And he was pulled from the game after that. Obviously, he got his hit in terms of keeping his hit record in check. Makes it 10 games in a row that he's actually got a hit on base. So that's great for him, but hopefully it's a small injury and hopefully he can recover it. I think we're supposed to be getting Matthew Boyd back. He was supposed to come back this weekend, and then obviously did get injured. And was a minor injury as well. So hopefully he'll be back and ready to go in terms of the Cubs. But thank God for that. Ultimately a series win finally for the Cubs for the well over a month that we haven't had a situation where we've won a series, and hopefully it stays that way in terms of the Cubs, and more to come in terms of Cubs. But we'll scroll back if I can find it. Shoulder soreness it was, because he was supposed to play this weekend. He was supposed to play probably against the Giants, but obviously didn't. But we'll see what happens with that. So it was going to be off the 15-day IL list, so injury list. So they have multiples in terms of that. Obviously they have I think they have a 10-day one, a 15-day one. They obviously have a 30-day one, and obviously a 60-day one. And I believe maybe a 90-day one. I'm not sure, but most of like Kane Horton obviously is out for the season. But Justin Steele, I think, is on the 61. But obviously I think they can be put back on the injury list if obviously that time elapses. But I think it's just obviously to show obviously players moving up from the second division and jumping down. So obviously we'll be without Talion until after the All-Star break. Justin Steele obviously is an unclear timetable right now, but we think it would be after the All-Star break as well. And obviously Kane Horton is done for the season. Cabrera, obviously Edward Cabrera has come back, but hopefully Matthew Boyd will be back relatively soon in terms of the Cubs, because we'll probably need him in terms of pitching. So series win, 2-1 in terms of games for the Cubs against San Francisco. First time in a long time for the Cubs, and hopefully we can keep it up in the series at home against the Rockies before obviously the break, and then obviously heading back home as well to play the Blue Jays. which who knows with that, because the Blue Jays are playing decent baseball, and they're not playing great, but they're playing very decent baseball at that. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. We've got a few things obviously to talk about next week. We've got the World Cup to talk about. Obviously got State of Origin to talk about. We've obviously got the Titans against the Panthers. We've got, the Giants against Carlton, which is a game I'll be going to. So obviously I'll be recording that on Sunday when I get back, because that is a Saturday game in particular on that front. In terms of the Panthers, I think that is also Saturday, I believe. Off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure. I think it was mid-game, mid-game Saturday. So obviously when I'm at the game against the for the Giants against the Blues, they'll be playing then towards the latter half of the game. So we'll see what happens with that. But lots to talk about next week. Hopefully going to be a huge episode next week as well. Hopefully this episode wasn't as big as the last few, especially last week. Sorry again for that blowing out to 2.5 hours, but got a lot to talk about. And then there was more to talk about because it ended up taking a week off, and then everything happened on the week that I took off. So yeah. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Mantez 100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care.